Hello everyone, and welcome to the first devlogs. So I thought I'd start this first devlogs just by talking through other projects I've sort of got in my workspace at the moment and what they all are and how they all work. I currently moved from using Windows and Eclipse to using Visual Studio Code and WSL, just because I found it's a lot smoother, it's a lot more integrated, and it's just a lot nicer to work with. So I'll move right into the first project, AMGN. AMGN is a framework I developed while working on SupBot, because I used to be a SupBot developer, for making large-scale Discord bots a lot easier. So the project's about 2 years old altogether, from conception to the proof of concept that I have now. I haven't worked on it in a while, and I recreated the repo that it's in just to fix some structuring issues. It was easier to do that. So the commit history is lost, but the code still remains. So the basic idea is that running features on SupBot, the way we used to do it was every single feature was coded as its own standalone jar, which was fine on a small scale when we had a few features and a few members. But as we got lots of members and we also got lots more features, this grew quite intensive and we started eating through the RAM. Mostly because each of those processes was caching all the members and it was becoming way too much to handle. If you think that we have, probably about 10 or so, 15 maybe features, all caching the same members and all using the same resources, it started to get very intensive. So I came up with a solution where we could design a system where we have one central node that controls each individual external feature. So there's only one cache to deal with, there's only one set of resources that everything uses, but they can all work independently of each other, but they can all be managed centrally. So that's the idea behind AMGN. It's also designed to let you have more of an SDK to work with if you're trying to develop a feature, so that you don't have to repeat yourself with a lot of the same features, especially if you're working in the same servers. You can create your own APIs, I suppose, or there are inbuilt methods and ease of use functions so that you don't have to repeat yourself as you're developing a large scale bot. So I'll try and walk you through how it works. There's two sides of AMGN. The first is the runtime side. So the runtime side is that this jar has a main method and can be ran as an executable. And when you run it as an executable, it will look for plugins to run on the network. It does also come with a few commands packed into it, and I'll get into those shortly. But yeah, one side of it is that you don't need to be a programmer and you can just run the network by running the jar, and it will start configuring things and running the plugins that you told it to run. The other side of AMGN is the developer side. So AMGN isn't just an executable, it's also its own SDK. So developers can use the AMGN SDK to start developing plugins that work with this network. So the advantage of this is that you only have one cache, you have one set of resources that the bot runs through, and the bot runs through each individual plugin. They're all controlled centrally, but they still have the advantages of being individual features that you can turn on and off remotely. So the way this works is here's the main method. I'll run through the main method. So the main method mostly just sets up the bot, reads in the bot settings and the network settings for the entire bot network. And then it comes with some intrinsic features. So there are intrinsic features to the network. So there are some commands that will always run even if you have no plugins running on the network. And I'll get into what those are shortly when we get to the SDK side of things. So it basically just sets up the network and gets ready to go. It will do things like validate that the plugins are valid, and basically just prepares the network ready for launch and loads any plugins it can find that are valid. In the IO, we have the other side of the executable part of AMGN. So the IO handler does all the heavy lifting of AMGN. It reads in JSON files, it exports out JSON files. JSON files are used for all of the config data that the network uses. But there's a method down here that does all of the actual heavy lifting of AMGN, and it's right here. It says quick hack fix, but it quickly became absolutely essential to the project. Basically what this does is it will scan the network directory for plugin jars, and it will extract the plugin from that to be used within the AMGN executable. So I don't know if there's a better way to do this, but this is the way I found to do this. I wasn't sure if it was the right way, so I plan to come back in the future and fix it, but it kind of just became something I didn't want to touch again. But anyhow, this is the part of the project that actually loads in plugins, which is called from the main method in here. So now I'm going to get into the entity side of things. Like I said, AMGN comes with an SDK, so that SDK includes a lot of wrapper classes and a lot of classes to abstract things and make things easier to understand. Oh, I should say, this project extends the JDA API wrapper for making Discord bots with Java, so it's supposed to be an extension from JDA. So JDA includes a lot of ease of use methods, and the SDK side of AMGN is supposed to build off of that and add even more functionality and even more quality of life features. First we have the guild class. Now the guild class doesn't wrap the JDA guild class, so I might turn this into a wrapper class where it does, although I haven't yet. And before I do that, I want to check if there's a reason why I haven't done it, but there probably isn't. So we have some default values. So if you don't provide, every guild can have its own prefix specified for commands. The default is this, and the default ID is -1 just to stop any ambiguities. And every guild comes with a mod logs channel, a mod role channel, and a prefix. So again, there's no reason why this can't sit on top of the existing guild class, to be honest. That might be something I look into. So it has a lot of getters, and it has this method here as JSON, which basically returns a JSON representation of it. I chose to pretty print it just because the JSON library I'm using is weird, and I will be replacing the JSON library in this project in the future because I used a very unmaintained, strange JSON library, and I'm not sure why, but I need to change it. And the as embeds method just returns all the guild information as an embed for use in commands mostly. This is basically a wrapper class for the JDA guild object, although it isn't officially. That's its functionality. The guild network class is where a lot of the SDK magic happens. All of the quality of life methods are included in the guild network class because a lot of them are methods that you want to call across the network. So a lot of it is stuff like asking if a member is staff in a guild, which is something you can configure in the config settings and via command, which I'll get into. You can get the prefix for a guild, you can get the details of a guild, register and unregister listeners, so you don't need to do that via JDA. You can do that formally through my SDK, and you should do it through my SDK because when you load and unload plugins, this becomes more important. So you can load them in with JDA on its own as you're using my SDK, but if you do that, you're going to run into problems with listeners not being unloaded when the plugin is unloaded. So you need to formally register it as a listener that's with your plugin via AMGN. I actually coded the ability to have commands formally registered by the network. And this is useful because one of the features AMGN comes with is an inbuilt help command. So the problem with help commands is that you often have to update them when you add more commands. The beauty of AMGN is that this is one of its quality of life features I was talking about, where it takes the stress off the developer. If you register a command through AMGN, the help command is automatically updated by AMGN because the help command is held centrally in AMGN. So all of the features where it would be annoying to code it as an individual plugin and it would be more beneficial to have it centralized, they are the internal plugins that AMGN has. So the help command is one of those. So by registering a command and unregistering commands via AMGN, you can save yourself a lot of hassle in the long run. Then we have functionality to enable and disable plugins from within the guild network. So these are methods that the main method again runs, but I don't see why you couldn't use them for your own plugins if you knew what you were doing, although I wouldn't recommend it. Send to mod logs, again, is a quality of life feature. I might make this more customizable in the future, but for now, this just streamlines the process of writing a message to mod logs. Whatever you want that message to say depends on the plugin. So hopefully as I do more development on this project, you'll see more about how these features all work together and why it's designed the way it's designed and how this is actually supposed to be used. If you are still unsure as to how it works, but you're interested, you are free to message me about it. This is my biggest project and I love talking about it. But this GitHub repo also comes with a README that might answer some of your questions, so I recommend going there. So we've talked about the guild and the guild network classes. The guild permission class is just an enum to represent some guild permissions to formalize the way that permissions are passed in AMGN, and that should become clear as I explain how this works. The listeners just contains a command, so command extends the listener adapter that comes with JDA, and this is just a way to formally pass in commands. So whenever you make a plugin with AMGN, you have to formally list all of the commands that your plugin comes with, and then you have to formally code them as commands in the plugin. But the advantage of this is once they're passed in using this constructor, once it's passed in, you get a lot of useful quality of life methods like checking if the command has permission programmatically, and that means that you can check programmatically if a user has permission to use your commands. And it also has a lot of getters to make getting the data easier once you've created a command. We also have this class. It's actually an enum called default commands. So all of the internal features, which I coded as internal features rather than external plugins, I created this enum called default commands, which passes them in. Because originally the way this feature worked is once I designed the plugins functionality, I tried to code all of these intrinsic features through the plugin API, which I just made. The problem with that is I ran into some path conflicts. So to get around that, I decided in the end to just make the internal plugins or the internal features not use the external plugin API, because it's more important that I can have to go through this process to set up a internal feature than it is for a user to have to not have a polished plugin feature. So yeah, this enum just passes in all the data here, so it's all predefined. In the future, you're going to be able to customize this a bit more, but for now, I've just preset it as an enum, so it's kind of global and immutable. But these are the features that AMGN comes with as standard, and this is how they're passed in. They're passed in as enums rather than via the public plugin class. If we go here to plugins and intrinsic, you'll see the actual code. So these folders all contain the actual code for each feature. So close network is a command that closes the entire network down. So it disables every plugin and closes the network. Again, this would be a pain to do through an external plugin, which is why it's coded as an internal plugin. Consistency just means that if your modlogs channel or your mod role in any guilds that the network is in is deleted, then this feature makes sure that the data is kept consistent with that. So none of your config files should need to be changed manually, because that defeats the entire purpose of this project. Again, that would be a pain to do externally because you have to manage the config, so I've done that for you. Control enable disable just gives you the ability to enable and disable commands on the fly. So this is where that enable plugin and disable plugin method come from in the guild network class. This is why they exist. So it is possible to enable and disable plugins via commands using this control enable disable feature. So it would be difficult to enable and disable plugins via another plugin, which is why I coded it centrally. The help commands, we already talked about why it's important for that to be central. The idea of plugins is that you can add and remove them interchangeably as you please on the fly. And if you're trying to update a help command, that's going to get really cumbersome. So what we've done is we've internalized the help command so that it doesn't matter what plugins you add or remove, as long as they're formally listed as a plugin in the AMGN SDK, the help command will automatically update, and when you call it, it will show the commands. It should also show the commands that are only usable by the user. So I've got a permission check here to make sure that only the commands that a user has permission to use are displayed by the help command. Metadata is just an internal feature to allow you to view what the metadata of a guild is and update the metadata of a guild. So all of those things that are passed to the guild constructor in the guild class, like the prefix, the mod logs, and the mod role, are able to be controlled on the fly by anyone that has access to this command. Operators is another internal feature, so the network has the ability to support operators, so operators have complete global control over the entire network, and this allows the adding and removing of operators. The person who owns the network and who has access to the back end of the network can change the config file. So if you need to add one operator to get the ball rolling, you can do this by manually editing the config file. And it's designed this way on purpose so that anyone who has the backends essentially has operator permission. And running is the last internal feature, which just lets you see which plugins are running on the network. Again, this would be a real pain to do externally, so we moved it internally because it makes sense to put it there. So you can see why all of these internal features are better placed inside than outside. It also means that as new features are added to AMGN, we can control these more carefully. It just makes sense to have them in a central place. This is the entire point of AMGN, is that we can control external individual plugins from one central place, even though those external places all use the same central cache and the same central resources. So hopefully now the use of AMGN is starting to come into practice. I'm not going to go into much more detail about this project, but it's been a fun project to work on. There are improvements that need to be made both to the SDK and to the executable side of this project. You can see a load of errors in the project now. I wouldn't worry about that. That's mostly because I just freshly imported this into VSC. So I think one of the problems is like file referencing, which isn't a big issue. And I think it's running on the wrong version of Java at the moment, which is a really easy fix. So that's why you see a lot of errors. But we ran this on Subbot in Wilbur server. That's a user base of about 330,000 people. And it improved the efficiency of the bot by about 600%. So this thing definitely does improve efficiency, which was the main goal. It was really easy to write the plugins for it, which was the second goal. And all around it worked as a really good alpha and a really good proof of concept that this is really good at large-scale bot development. I would say if you're a small-scale bot developer and you're making a bot for a small number of people or a small server, you are free to use this and it will work just as well. But it might not be the most efficient use of your time to be using this and fiddling around with it. But if you're using a medium scale to a large scale bot, both in terms of members and features, this is definitely a useful project to have. So I'm looking forward to working on this in the future. I've got more features planned for the SDK, and I have more streamlining I can definitely do to this project and tidying up the code. So it'll be fun to continue to work on this and show you guys more of it. The next project is Asda. So I live with 2 other people and it's a real pain sometimes to organize the shopping. So we have one person who does the shopping and we just tell them what we want on the shopping list. But the problem is they sometimes forget. So at the moment I'm coding Chrome extensions so that I can custom request things to add to the shopping list. And then when they go to checkout on the Asda checkout, it will remind them to put certain things in their basket and give them a button to just add it to the basket. All the code you see right now is just the Chrome extension tutorial. So it's not much to see, but that is a project I've started to work on. Infinite Tesco's is a project I've been working on for a while. I've taken a huge break from it just because I got burnt out with the editing, but I'm going to take a new approach to it, as I am with this whole devlogs. This project is currently broken because I've just literally moved all the files over to VSC and WSL, so this project isn't set up for the environment I'm currently in, but that shouldn't take too long to fix. But I'm really looking forward to getting back on the Infinite Tesco's train and coding more than I already did, hopefully at a faster rate as well. So I don't need to go into too much more detail because you guys have probably already seen all of that. MusicBot is actually a finished project. When Discord started taking down bots like Rhythm and Groovy, I wanted to make my own music bot for, friends and people that I'd like so that they can use it. This project is finished, the bot works, but obviously I would never use it ever, but I just wanted to code it as a proof of concept and I would never dream of using it ever in a million years. But it does work, I have tested it, and it does work. WebOld and website are my attempt to make a website to show off my skills and to display my portfolio in a more professional way than just using my GitHub profile. So WebOld is just vanilla HTML5, CSS3 and JavaScript, and website is actually a React port of the project, which I'm still in the process of doing. I'm having a real headache with this, but it's interesting to learn front end, so it'll be interesting to work on this again. So that's all my projects. If you have any more questions about any of it, then I'd love to talk about it. If you want to hear more about it, reach out to me on Discord or subscribe to the channel or join our Discord or go back and watch some of the old videos if you're interested in Infinite Tesco's. But now what I thought it would be interesting to do is to run a spinner to see which project I should work on next, because I am equally excited about all of them in different ways. Okay, so we have AMGN, Asda, Infinite Tesco's, or the website that we can work on next, and I'm just going to spin this wheel and we're going to see what we get. Okay, So it seems like we'll be working on Infinite Tesco's next, so I'm going to spend a bit of time developing Infinite Tesco's further, and I'll make a devlogs about it. I'll keep you updated. So thank you so much for this. I hope it's been interesting. If you've got any questions, please let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.